Swords are the coolest weapons in video games. And what's better than a sword? A big sword. Hey there, I'm MacLeod, and today we're gonna talk about weapons of my namesake and the most iconic wielder of oversized greatswords. Because I will rank all of Cloud's weapons from Final Fantasy VII REBIRTH. This list will be somewhat subjective because I will take things like looks into account. But I also based it on the actual stats and skills of the swords, so even if you don't end up agreeing with the ranking, this video will still help you pick a personal favorite based on what stats or builds you prefer. None of the swords are useless and you can make them all work if you like them best, but I think there's definitely ones that are better than others. A quick explanation of what weapon skills are, as that is important to the builds and ranking. For each sword, you can select weapon skills that give a bonus to either action, stats, or passive abilities. Besides materia, those are what you can use to make different builds on a character. You will start with 1 slot for weapon skills and get up to 4 in the end game. I will be talking about the weapons at their strongest, so with 4 slots. Let's get right into it at the bottom with the Crystal Sword. Right off the bat, or well, sword, this is a pretty weird one to rank, because on one hand this sword could have some of the highest potential of all the swords, and that's because you can build it around a critical hit build. I had to do some digging to even find out how crits actually work in this game. I probably have over 700 hours combined on FF7 Remake and Rebirth, but I've never actually had a reason to go and look up how critical hits work in these games. And I'm still not even 100% sure. The crit rate of attacks is based on the luck stat, but I couldn't find any information on how exactly it actually translates. Cloud does not have the highest luck stat, but also not a horrible one either. You can boost crit rate by 10% and up to 30% for weapon abilities specifically. You can boost your crit damage from a base 10% bonus damage to 40%. However, at max level, this means you can only boost the crit rate by 5% or only 10% for abilities. And even if you use luck up to maximize your crit rate, it's still inconsistent damage. Stat-wise, this sword is okay, but gets outclassed by either the Rune Blade having way higher magic attack, or the Slipstream Saber with only slightly less magic attack and better physical attack. The sword does have stat weapon skills that can give it the edge over, for example, the Slipstream Saber, but then you can barely make a crit build work anymore. The weapon seems to just not have enough skill slots to make for a proper build, and then it also lacks the variety that other swords can offer. To sum it up, I just think it's outclassed by other swords that do the same job but better. And also, it's not my favorite visually. I like the cyan color, but despite being made of a magic crystal, it doesn't even glow in the dark. Sad. Now for the next one, the Igneous Saber. I think a lot of people really like that one, and it's a valid choice. Personally, it's one of my least favorites visually, which is probably what bumped it down a bit. But I also think it's not the best choice, even if you're going for a fully physical damage build. It has the highest physical base damage, but it severely lacks in magic attack. It has a mix of offensive and defensive skills to select from. You can make up for the lack in magic attack a little bit with a plus 20 in magic attack, but that still puts you a good bit below the second worst magic attack. It's also one of the few swords that can give Cloud a higher base HP, which can be very useful. It has a few niche skills that you can use for your build, like a debuff extension or stronger buffs for teammates. The sword is very flexible and it has a bunch of great things going for it, but it kind of lacks a bit of direction. It's a good option for physical attack, but if you're going for a physical attack build and don't want any of the more niche skills that the sword has, then there's another sword that I would personally recommend, but more on that later. On to the next sword, the Umbral Blade. This one is rather low on the list, however it's actually the best at one kind of build, a support tank build. Basically all of the skills that this sword has are some kind of defensive tank or support ability. It's the only sword that lets you get a stat boost in defense by 50 points, which is actually pretty significant. It lets you use healing spells for less MP cost. It can enhance your physical guard. It can give you higher HP. It can save you from incapacitation once per battle. It can give you faster MP regeneration. It can make your limit charge faster while tanking and blocking damage. There is so much flexibility in what exactly you want out of this sword, but it all follows the same theme of being tank and support focused, which is why I would say this is the best sword for a purely supportive tank build. You do give up a lot of physical and magic attack, and it's on the lower end for both of those stats. It has the lowest total attack stat value by a decent chunk, and it does take a hit just because Barret exists, and he's arguably the best tank in the game. But if you want to run 2 damage focused builds with Cloud as a support, where you don't care as much about his damage output, then this is your go-to sword. Also, visually, this one is pretty sick. It gives me major FF14 Dark Knight vibes, and it glows in the dark. Nice. Now onto the next saber on the list, the Rune Blade. This is the best choice if you want to build Cloud as a mage, and you can basically break the game with this one. By far the most magic attack but lackluster physical attack. But you can push both of those even higher with skills that give bonus stats in magic attack or physical attack, making this by far the strongest in terms of magic attack stats. Combined with the full power magic skill, which enhances spells at full MP, this has perhaps the highest damage potential in the game. Combine that with MP Absorb and Genji Gloves, and here you have a foolproof way of breaking the endgame. However, this is sort of situational. It works best when the opponent has an elemental weakness, and it also requires a lot of setup to be effective. You'll usually want Aerith to help buff you with Arcane Ward and so on. So while it can be the most effective way to absolutely melt boss health bars, it's also not the most consistent and easy to do, and also not the most fun to me. And the lack of physical damage is definitely a downside. However, it does look hella sick, and for a Mage Cloud build, I think this is the best sword. Even visually, the runes on the blade give a lot of flair to this sword. The hilt also kinda reminds me of the Engine Blade, so maybe that's a reason for FF15 fans to pick it up. While there's no actual engine on it, it's a very similar shape, just with a giant blade and sick runes on it. Now in the top 3. Next up is the Slipstream Saber. This sword is surprisingly the only sword that has a higher total amount of base attack stats, which already makes it above average, just stat-wise. It doesn't have as many stat bonus skills. You can raise the magic attack by 20, which can put it above the Crystal Saber in magic attack. But I think the main strength of this weapon is how well rounded it is, and how you can make a great MP build with it. You can raise the MP by 6, which is more than any other sword, and you can add 2 MP recovery up skills, which will noticeably increase your MP regeneration. This is particularly strong on hard mode, where your MP doesn't get regenerated at benches. It also has other MP recovery methods, with stagger recovery, which gives you MP and HP when you stagger an enemy, which is good on Cloud since he's great at staggering people. Also, trade-off lets you recover MP whenever you get hit by a stronger attack. However, building around getting hit by big damage attacks seems somewhat suboptimal to me. It has one perk that it shares with the Igneous Saber that maybe now is the right time to mention. Unrelenting Punisher. I didn't mention it earlier because I think it's just not too good. It lets you do your attacks in Punisher mode for way longer than before, which sounds fun, but when I tried recording an example of this, I barely managed to get all the way through to showcase how long it is. So basically, it's so long you're barely ever gonna need it. And having to do the 2 slower attacks to start slashing again in Punisher mode isn't the biggest deal. I think other Punisher mode perks are way better, like Formidable Counter or just a straight up damage buff. The former of which the Slipstream Saber actually has. The Slipstream Saber doesn't really take a big hit because of it, since it has great perks to make up for it, but it's just not a skill I would recommend in general. However, the perk that stands out to me besides the MP focused options is the attack damage increase. You can increase the damage of your basic attacks by 5%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about how much of a battle you just attack to build up ATB, it's really noticeable. I tried that one and I actually noticed quite the difference. Besides that, it's my second favorite sword looks-wise, and it just looks so Cloud core. It reminds me of the fusion sword with the red hilt, and the leather details are sick too. And it glows in the dark. Take this, Crystal Saber. This sword clears it in looks, glow, and effectiveness in battle, at least in my opinion. Now for the second place of this list, the Sleek Saber. The Sleek Saber is actually not my favorite sword visually, and while that's subjective, this sword has some great things going for it that undeniably makes it one of the best swords in the game. While for some reason it has Unrelenting Punisher twice, which as I've said I think is almost useless, it has some other things going for it. I think there's two major ways how you can build this sword, and you can mix and match those how you like. Either as a stat machine, taking it up to only 4 less physical attack than the Igneous Saber, while having double the magic attack. And with that, you still have 1 slot to use with whatever skill you like. And then, the other way, an ATB build. You can stack ATB charge rate up twice on this sword, and then stack 2 weapon ability ATB recovers on top of that, and you'll throw out abilities faster than any other sword can. And, as I said, you can mix those, only get 40 physical attack and ATB charge rate up twice, which is probably the highest physical DPS build you can get. Basically, it's really good, and even visually, while it's not my favorite, it undeniably looks pretty great. It's definitely sleek, and the way the shiny blade reflects sunlight does look very neat. But now, the last and only sword that could be in first place. The Buster Sword. This sword, while it lacks the direction for builds that some other swords have, it makes up for it in variety and just having all the right perks. It's the perfect all-rounder. It's the only sword that can give you up to 400 HP, and it can get MP recovery up, which is both clutch for hard mode. You can enhance the physical guard, which makes this sword viable for a tank build without sacrificing the attack stats as much. It's above average in both physical and magical attack. You can also buff your limit damage. It's the best option if you want Cloud to be tanky, but also be able to dish out damage all the same. And to me, with how flexible the rest of the perks are, this is the quintessential Cloud weapon. A DPS that can deal but also take punishment with above average stats in all areas, except maybe speed, which makes him the most flexible among the cast. And that's just stats wise. This weapon also gets a huge lore and visual buff. To me, this is the most iconic sword in all of gaming. The shape of it is peak fantasy sword design, and the way they redesigned it for remake is just perfect. And then, of course, this sword was given to Cloud by Zack. Without getting into spoilers, it carries the legacy and honor of both its previous owners in Angeal and Zack. Using it just feels right, and that's why of course it's number 1. That's it for my list. I'm gonna be honest, I almost exclusively used the Buster Sword in my first playthrough of Rebirth. But every now and then it's fun to lay down the sword in honor of Zack, and try some others. Sort of like Cloud does in Advent Children, you know? What's your personal favorite? Which sword would you use if you had to pick one besides the Buster Sword? Let me know in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It really helps the channel out. And you will get my gratitude. I'll send it in the mail. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye for now.